Hello, my name is David Brett, coming to you today from Galiano Island at the Galiano Cemetery, where there's a story that is just shocking. Really. It's a clash of cultures. You have a story where you have this vague claim of Indigenous burial or archaeological site or sacredness that is kind of upset the apple cart with this gravesite. The problem is the gravesite was getting crowded, so they did a fundraising campaign all through the island and raised a bunch of money to buy another acre of land. But after they shelled out all the 100 plus, $150,000, $160,000, well, guess what? Sure enough, surfaced a claim that it's sacred, that you can't bury anyone, not only on the new plot, but they're not even allowed to bury people in the old plot. They have to do these crazy kind of above ground soil piles where they may place cremains of people, but that's it. So we're going to talk to Bill Russell, who's been following this issue in great detail, and he's going to describe what happened here. And it really speaks to some of the larger issues facing the BC. Suddenly, vague, unsubstantiated claims of burials kind of blocking people and secret meetings, confidentiality, can't get the information, and people are just upset and they can't get anywhere. And the sense that there's a political situation going on here, it's very, very upsetting to people who can't bury their ancestors here anymore at this cemetery that goes back to 1928. So that's what we're going to get into here. We're going to discuss this in detail and how this connects into the bigger issues that are affecting you in your communities. Hello, my name is David Brett. I'm the editor of the New Westminster Times, coming to you today from beautiful Galiano Island in the Gulf Islands of BC. And joining me today is Galiano resident Bill Russell. Thanks for joining us, Bill.
My pleasure. Glad to be here, and glad to see you here.
Well, so where are we? We are at the Galiano Cemetery. So this has become a story that Bill's going to tell us about that kind of engages some of the bigger issues facing the province of BC today. So much of the news these days deals with cemeteries and burials and Indigenous claims to burial sites that often can be rather sketchy or unverified or, shall we say, unproven claims of Indigenous burials that really affect people in a direct and significant way. And this is one of those stories. So, Bill, can you just give us a 101 on the story of what happened here with this gravesite that I understand was becoming full?
Mm-hmm.
So the plan was to expand by a plot of land over in that direction.
That's right, over there.
And a fundraiser was done, and the money was raised.
And the land was donated at a discount price.
Right. So why don't you tell us the story right from the top?
Okay, from the start, this area was used for burials, apparently before this land became a part of the church burial grounds. This was officially owned by the Georgesons, and the Georgesons were a mixed race couple, Indigenous and European. They donated this land as a cemetery back in 1928.
Right.
So for almost 100 years, this land has been dug up. People put in 6 feet down with their markers and so on, and it's been used that way as a burial ground. When it became apparent that it was running out of room, it was decided to purchase this additional piece. But something to keep in the back of your mind is I spoke to the chief of the Penellicate at one point, and the natives at the time, this is before the arrival of the Europeans, who forbade them leaving the bodies on the ground, what they did was they took their dead and they put them in a midden, or they buried them in dirt. They didn't bury them. So anybody who says they're looking for evidence of people being buried here have to be talking about before this land was ever used as a cemetery. And if it's been dug up for almost 100 years, you think it's strange that out of the thousands of experiences with dead bodies, you would find lots of skeletons, and none have been found. There's not even a ground-penetrating radar study being proposed. But anyway, so this land was all part of a functioning cemetery for the island. Anybody could be buried here. They didn't have to be white. They didn't have to be Indigenous. Anybody who wanted to be buried here. And it was running out of room. And the fellow who publishes the active page here on the island ran a campaign to raise money to get additional room. He was here as a sexton, I believe his title was, and that's somebody who looks after a burial ground. And they organized the purchase of that chunk of land over there. Okay, the additional land that was purchased, there's a fence along that edge here, and you can see there's a sign on there saying this is the new Galiano Cemetery, or land for the new cemetery. And you can see where the fence ends there, and then it goes up from there, across the back, and up roughly where that truck, the end of that truck is, up to that area. So all that area is additional grave sites.
So this large area would, with some foresight, this could be for the next 100 years, right?
Yeah.
It's a 50-year plan. It's a 100-year plan. This one's been here for 100 years. Why not?
It's taken 100 years to fill it.
Why not plan for the next 100 years?
Exactly. No, it's a wonderful idea.
And
it's a beautiful spot.
And it just hit a roadblock, and no one knows why.
Oh, I think in fact we do know why. We just don't like why.
Right.
It's political. And as soon as you get into secrecy and political, there is no explanation, no rational explanation.
Well, it's a lovely grove of trees and ferns.
It is,
It's very peaceful here, I must say.
Yeah.
Perfect place for a cemetery, a place of rest. I see.
To add to this land.
How much of land would you say is up there?
I think it's probably about an acre.
About an acre of land.
Yeah, it's quite large.
Yeah.
And that process was done through community fundraising, and the publicity for it was done through the Active Page magazine, which Ralph publishes every month. And so it would be a huge task to believe that people on this island didn't know money was being raised to buy land to add to the cemetery.
Right.
So it wasn't an issue. When the land was actually handed over formally, the chief of the Penellicate at the time was here on the site and blessed the transfer of the land to turn it into a cemetery, so a cemetery land. So that's assuming that at this time, with all this publicity and all this background knowledge and so on, that the chief would bless this transfer. Yeah, it doesn't sound rational to me. So that was what the lead-up was until it became shut down. The cemetery committee issued a dictum, if you like, or an edict that said this land is now an archaeological site and no burials will be permitted. And the exact year that was done, I can provide you with the paperwork, but that's basically what happened. But the explanation was that it became known that this was in fact an archaeological site. So at that point, the proverbial hit the fan, because now nobody can get buried here. And the explanation was because this was sacred land. So we can't touch the land. It has to be preserved forever.
Okay, let's get this straight. So this has been here for almost 100 years, or possibly
1928. That was when it became official.
And then it became known. It was filling up, and there was a big, very public campaign to raise. Well, how much money was it?
I think it was $170,000, something like that, to buy the land.
170 grand.
Yeah.
So everyone
big donors
pitches in, puts their back into it.
Yeah.
To do something good for the community.
Exactly.
To encourage.
It's a community asset.
Yeah, it's the people who live on the island who are part of this community. And this is a very public thing, and it's only after the transaction takes place. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, it is deemed to be a sacred site that is potentially archaeologically sensitive for reasons which are...
Well, actually, at the time, the claim was that it is archaeologically special, and that decision was made through an investigation by somebody who did the job for nothing,
Mm.
will not identify themselves. They don't want anybody to know who they were, which should raise issues as to whether or not this is a genuine case or not, right? If people won't identify themselves. But that person is supposed to be qualified in the province of British Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
And to date, it hasn't been possible to determine that. The archaeological branch has not responded. What also has to be understood is the archaeological branch believes seriously in secrecy.
Mm.
Its confidentiality is associated with everything. The very fact that this is an archaeological site is confidential information. You cannot get confirmation. Whoever the person was that made the claim in the first place that this was in fact sacred land, it's also sacred. Secret, I should say, not sacred.
Mm.
The investigation then is taken on by this person who's supposed to be qualified, and they submit a determination to the archaeological branch, not the heritage branch.
Mm-hmm.
The heritage branch requires all this information to be made public. There is a notice and it must be posted publicly. But whoever initiated this process selected this spot as being an archaeological site. And because of that, there's the laws of secrecy kick in. So nothing from the beginning to the end is public. The only people who have the right to it are the people who own the land, which in this case is the church.
Mm-hmm.
And they responded by saying, we have nothing to say.
Now, I imagine there must be a lot of people that this has made very upset.
So
They must be very angry about this. It seems such a personal thing to have happen. It can, when you're talking about people burying their dead, and there's a certain amount of respect in that, and it's part of the community's collective memory, and there's a sacredness to this space, even though it's not Indigenous, but it's deemed to be sacred by the church or by whoever. So what has been the reaction and the blowback to this decision? When did this decision come out to ex-nay the burials?
I think it was 2025. Because of this secrecy that's involved, it's taken me more than a year now. A year ago, Dallas Brody took up the issue and came here with a videography to publicize the issue. It hasn't been picked up by any of the major media, hasn't been picked up by any of the local papers. The active page hasn't published anything about it except this explanation from the committee, the graveyard committee, cemetery committee, tried to make some statement that it was all sacred ground for this, that, and the other reason, right? And therefore there'd be no more burials.
Yeah.
But there was no attempt to take on board the fact that whoever did have family here were going to be devastated by this news. And as somebody who's an agnostic, I find it really a challenge to believe that the Anglican Church has walked away from this as a humanitarian issue. Why did they participate in this? Keep it a secret, knowing the effect it's going to have on members of their congregation. But they did, and it's protected by law.
Yes, and I think, this sort of engages a lot of issues that are in the broader context of the politics of British Columbia. We're talking about DRIPA, the Cowichan case, the general backdrop of the mining industry, which is something I'm involved in. There's surfaces this general claim to sacredness of certain areas. And this came forward in the case of Banks Island, the Gitsala case, that sort of the judge really instantiated DRIPA into law when there was this appeal. So a lot of it rested on a rather vague inference that certain areas, undefined areas, are sacred. So, but this is not on reserve land, so you would think that the archaeological branch would have certain policies and procedures for deeming specific places to be archaeologically important. So
they had that capacity, but the thing you have to keep in mind, it's all confidential. Why they reached that decision is all in confidence, and you can't question it. The only person who's legally able to contest those findings is you have to hire another archaeologist. They can then read the report, read the findings, and they can contest whatever was the original conclusion. But the beauty of that is that it's a catch-22. You can appeal against this notice, if you like. It's called, I think it's called the PHR, I think, and it's protected heritage region or protected area. You have to base your appeal to have it removed from the register on contradicting the evidence that it is in fact a special place. But you're not allowed to see what that evidence is. So this is structured in the law. The laws in British Columbia have made it so. If they were serious about wanting to keep people above board and upfront about what they're doing, they wouldn't ever have put this secrecy provision in, so confidentiality, as a de facto. They would have said, no, you show in some way that this is necessary to protect that area.
Okay,
They don't have to.
So a bunch of money is raised. A plot of land is bought. Now, had the land transfer not proceeded, could someone have come along and, say, built a home there? Or would now this new sacred designation have blocked any development of that land? Or is it just for cemetery purposes? The timing seems very suspicious as to why it would happen in that sequence.
Well, I think the timing has to do with politics. That somebody, it's just my own spin on it, what I think makes sense, is that somebody was politically active and appreciated the nuances of the law and said, we can do all this without having to reveal our sources or any evidence. We can just go ahead and do it. So if you follow that, if you follow that.
Sorry, just going to interject here. If you can hear a horn, you can see the BC ferry going through in the background, where that is active pass over there. It's an incredible spot. But it kind of speaks to the majesty of the location of the cemetery overlooking active pass.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So go on about
okay, I'm just saying
the timing.
Because of the structure of the law, if you understand it fully and you realize that if you're an activist, somebody who wants to make a point, makes a point of Indigenous ownership or Indigenous claim, if you realize that you can do all this in secret without telling anybody, without informing anyone until it's after the fact, so you get your archaeologist, he writes up your report, hands it off to the archaeological department, now that land becomes closed off. You can't disturb the land. You've essentially done all this without having to involve anybody else. You don't have to inform the community. You don't have to have any open discussion. It's just, it's all done in secret through the structure of the law.
Yes, and this theme of secrecy is a common one when it comes to Indigenous issues in BC. In the mining industry, you'll have the companies or the government will be talking to the First Nation and working out deals regarding areas that should be segmented due to this idea of sacredness. And there's litigation where the companies are suing the government now over this sort of general blanket saying, well, this we've decided that this mountain pass is sacred. Or Banks Island, where there was an actual gold mine situated, and now it's been effectively expropriated from the company. But what has come out in the litigation, some of the files, is that people are complaining in court that the government is having conversations and discussions with First Nations behind closed doors without third parties involved. So the parties that are affected. So let's just say the the parties affected here are the people who purchased the land, and it was donated to.
Donated to the Anglican Church as part of this.
So the parties affected are not consulted or involved.
The people who are in charge of the cemeteries in British Columbia, this fellow whose name doesn't want to be revealed, he has the power, because he owns that piece of land now, to request this report from the Archaeological Branch. And as far as I can read into what I've been told by the Archaeological Branch, he's free then to reveal all that information to the public.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like nobody can find out ever. This is built into the rules. Where the rules get messy, to me, anyway, to do with trying to do something about what's been done to this property, is that evidence can't be verbal. I got those statements from the Archaeological Branch. So all the stories people can talk about, my relatives were here, my great-grandfather, none of that is allowed to be used if you're talking about an archaeological site. Physical evidence must predate 1847.
Mm-hmm.
That's hardwired. So if you've been burying people here since 1928, it's a pretty hard sell to suggest that, that's one of the conditions that was successful in taking this place away from the residents.
Okay, so what happens now? Is there people do pass away? Where would they be buried now? Is there another alternative site? And what if that then also is declared sacred? It seems like a potential repeating theme that any site could be declared sacred, and you'd never know why.
Never know why. There is a burial site over there, which is a family of a friend of mine, and she's getting old and frail, and she's thinking I'll go there. And she attended a meeting where it was announced that this ground is now an archaeological site. You're not going to disturb the soil. Well, her family's buried there. And one of the other people who were at the meeting said, well, you're not going to get buried over the bodies of my ancestors. But if that person understood the history of the behavior of the tribe at the time, they didn't get buried. They were placed on a midden, or where they were on the ground, get covered with earth. So that shows that it's really political. It's nothing to do with archaeology or history or any of that. It's just we have the power to do this. We can take that cemetery away, and we're going to do it.
Well, something we've talked a lot about on our YouTube channel is the difference between reconciliation and decolonization. Some people say, and I agree, that decolonization is the opposite of reconciliation. So the decolonial motivation is to remove colonial features from the land. So to discourage settlement. So if you think of a burial ground as part of a long-term process of settling an area, if people have nowhere to bury their dead, won't they be discouraged from coming here?
Well, I think the complication for that issue is simply the fact that the people who donated that land were a mixed-race couple. And there's been no restriction on who gets buried here. They can be Indigenous, they can be European, anybody who's interested, have a tie to the land and simply applies, they're buried here. So it's hard to claim that it has this unique property of just only being for Europeans, or this unique property of only being for Indigenous. It's been that way since it was donated. So to me, it hollows out that argument that somehow this is a special area just for Europeans and whatever.
True, but I'm just thinking of what would get into the mind of an activist to go to all the trouble to do this, other than to say, well, if we block the ability for people to bury their dead, then it is part of the process of slowing down colonization and actually reversing the colonization process. Not that it's real. And we talked, did a series of videos from New Westminster where there's cemeteries, a series of cemeteries where hundreds and hundreds of people were buried in New Westminster along Douglas Road, now 8th Avenue, where the sites were heavily disturbed by uh, building, and there was a high school literally built on top of many of the grave sites. And there was an archaeological study called forward when they were going to build a new school.
Hmm.
Well, they did the archaeological study was overseen by Golder Associates, and they did ground penetrating radar, and within weeks of getting the results, they started excavating and doing a proper archaeological process. There's a 150-page report. So if there's a claim to burials,
Hmm.
we have evidence that's a very good example of how it's supposed to be done. Okay, are there burials here?
Yes, everywhere.
Well,
Everywhere
here,
there
there
is.
are here. We know that. But say on the other plot over there, well, are there Indigenous burials? Well, in the case of New Westminster, it was understood that there were potentially Indigenous burials outside the normal grave sites. So there was like 30 or 40 anomalies that were identified, and they were excavated almost immediately.
Hmm.
Excavators, boreholes, and they also had Indigenous monitors on site. They had uh, there was like 23 First Nations that were engaged and involved in this, and everyone wanted it to happen right away. There was no hand wringing or second guessing. But this was down back in 2016, 2017. Something has radically changed. So this happening at this time, it is so, it just seems so bizarre that this would happen here, and there just doesn't seem to be any rational explanation for it.
When you don't have a rational explanation, that's when politics comes in.
Right.
So if it's a political activity or a political action to flex your muscles, say we can do this, so we're going to. A couple of things make me think it's political, not the least of which is that a new edict came out that you can't disturb the soil, but you can put 4 inches of loam over the top of it. And then you can place the ashes of the deceased there and put a plaque there, but it can't be more than 4 inches deep into the loam, so you don't touch the earth. That level of description suggests to me that nobody's thinking rationally. It's not a burial, and it's not putting somebody on the ground. It's, let's see, how can we work this scenario so that we can allow people to be placed here in their ashes, but not disturb the soil. So you come up with this incredibly inventive solution. That's not because of your deep respect or the care for the people who are buried here.
Mm-hmm.
That's to give you an out. So you can say, well, yes, you can still have your bodies put here, but you can't disturb the ground.
So maybe we'll wrap it up there, Bill. Thank you for telling us the story.
Yeah.
At this point in time, is there any other steps that are being taken? Is there anything that people can do are they trying to litigate or get their money back, or is it just they resigned themselves to it?
They've gone after Ralph to try and get their money back because they donated the money in good faith for that land to come here. I don't know whether it's going to pick up any traction or not, because it's a very involved, complicated process, because it was actually the magazine that raised the money, not Ralph. So that was under their auspices. That's how that was done. But as far as community reaction is concerned, keep in mind that I would say that probably 99% of this island is not even aware of what's gone on here. And that's the purpose of what should be coming out in the next active page. And it'll be a description of what took place, what the events were, and then we'll see whether or not what the reaction is. But legally, what's required, even if people get upset and they're angry and you have to do something, because of the confidentiality aspect of virtually everything, trying to get any information is not going to work, to me. An option is being provided or being suggested by our MLA, which does involve.
Well, we definitely know where we are.
Same to you. It is to involve the ombudsman.
Yeah.
His forte was helping to draft freedom of information rules in British Columbia, and he's quite disgusted at the levels of secrecy that the current government is involved in. We want to do everything that's in secret. We don't have to reveal anything. Well, the one person they can't keep the secrets from is the ombudsman.
Mm-hmm.
So his suggestion is that's our legal path. Because I think it's political, I think no matter how much people jump up and down and scream and yell, it'll just be ignored because the law is on their side.
Right.
But if you can show that the law was abused or misread or ignored, then that's grounds for then removing this property and that property from any listing.
Okay, well, there you have it. This is a particular place in a particular community, but the themes are very much in common. Secret discussions, vague allegations of Indigenous sacredness or Indigenous burial, unsubstantiated claims of burials, unrevealed or very foggy, amorphous, nebulous claims that are taken as gospel, and this sort of just stymies and stifles the community. And this theme is just, it's just boiling up throughout the entire province, and you wonder where it's all going to end. So thank you, Bill, for telling us the story today.
Because it wasn't for you, this process would never have been revealed. Our so-called responsible media won't touch it with a barge pole. They're all terrified of being labeled as racist or whatever. So this situation, they're not prepared to do anything about it. But you are. So good on you. Yeah. Well done.
Well, thanks, Bill. Yeah. And we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching this episode from the New Westminster Times. If you enjoy our journalism, I invite you to go to our website, newwesttimes.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. And up in the right-hand corner, there's a button that says support our work. If you would feel so inclined, we would really appreciate it. It would help us to do more of this work. It's not free to run an online newspaper and do all that we do. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it.
Thank you.